Bonjour, Anin, Indinoy, Niganidag. Hi, my relatives. Bongi etago, Ninito Ojibwe, Mninga Gogwe, Jatun, Jer Ojibwe Moyan. I don't know very much Ojibwe, but I try to use it when I can. So, Alexandra and Indigenous Cause, my name's Alexandra. I'm super flattered and honored to be here with these badasses. I was like, should I correct it? No, I'm gonna do it. The big message was show up as yourself. So grateful that y'all came out tonight, grateful to be here. And I just want to get started by having y'all introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself and your sport and who you are and whatever else you want to say to get this going.
I guess I have to be first.
You moved to the first place.
I'm Bobby Larson, and my sport is I'm really a river rat by nature. I was forced into it as a young child. I grew up on the West Coast in Tahoe, and so in the winter times we were ski bums, and in the summer times we were river rats. So I have downhill skied where there are actually mountains, and started many years ago when skis were actually this wide. Still learning how to ride on these big fat
really
skis.
long too, right?
Yeah, really long too. But for sure I am a water baby.
So you know that part about imposter syndrome that they talked about, like I'm having some massive imposter syndrome right now. So anyway, I'm working on. I'm Megan Kress, and I come at this event tonight in a couple of different angles. My sport is water-based as well, much like Bobby. I have been involved with a very unusual sport called dragon boating at a very high level, if you can imagine such a thing, with the U.S. national team, and now I'm coaching a team with Canada. I'm preparing for the next election. But I also come at this from the outdoor industry perspective, and then I've worked in the industry for a really long time. Over 20-some years. I don't want to date myself. And so a lot of these messages that were in the movie tonight really speak to me.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan. My name is Lindsay. My original sport would have been paddling. I did a couple expeditions, so couple 1,000 miles of paddling up to Hudson Bay. I circumnavigated Lake Superior by sea kayak, and I did 600 miles of that alone. And then I moved into being a Girl Scout canoe guide in the Boundary Waters, which really is the heart of what still motivates me today. A lot of my passion is including people of different genders, people who don't feel like they belong out in the outdoors in whatever sport it may be, leading through representation, invitations, etc. So my role now and my favorite thing to do is mountain biking. And so I do a lot of that. I'm on the COGS Enduro committee, so leading some of the Enduro races, did some mountain bike instruction. I currently help run the Continental Ski and Bike Conti Crew, so that's our ambassador team, which we have a number of them here. If you guys want to raise your hands, we've got like 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, there's a couple of us. Yep, a couple in the back, which is really, really important to me because my dream is that Duluth is an outdoor mecca that people feel included in. So not everybody feels included in other places and other spaces. And the Conti crew is more than half female or gender nonconforming people, and you don't see a lot of teams or ambassador programs that are that way. So we have a lot of intention around making the outdoors more inclusive in our Twin Ports community.
Thanks, Lindsay. I definitely feel what you're talking about, Megan. With a little bit of imposter syndrome sitting up here, especially with you. Yeah, my name's Madison. I use she, her pronouns, and when I read the questions before we sat down up here, one of them was, what is your sport? And I don't feel like I necessarily fit into like, this is my one sport that I do. I love jumping around to different things. I love learning and being a novice and asking questions about how to be in a new space, and I love bringing people along in that because I think sometimes that is the most intimidating piece of jumping into something new is just being like, oh, I actually have no idea how to ski, or I have no idea how to paddle whitewater. And it's been really fun to like jump into those different spaces and be like, oh, I'd love to learn. Like, let's all go figure this out, or let's ask the people who have been doing this for a while. I'd say currently, I grew up Nordic skiing. I grew up in Minnesota, and I like to downhill ski as well, but Nordic skiing is where like my passion lies. And I recently have gotten into ultra running, which has been a very fun, more competitive aspect of like doing endurance activity. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. I'm Megan McMahon. I am one of the Conti ambassadors. My sports are skiing, big downhill skier. Obviously, broken foot, so I got a while till I get to do that. I'm a mountain biker, and I'm also a sailor. I'm here through the lens of, I also do a lot of work with the adaptive community here in Duluth. I'm a trainer of adaptive sports, and I'm hoping to bring that conversation into this area as well, as long as I was on the COGS board for a while. I don't know, I do a lot of things around here. Oh yeah, FTW rides, enduro, things like that.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. That's a big part of what I know the Conti crew, and then also our collaboration with Ski Hut and Cogs and Spoken Gear, is we've had a Thursday night femme, trans, and women's ride that persisted all the way till our darkest November, but that is a pretty awesome space that Bobby pulled me into, and then pulled other people into. So a Thursday night ride or ski or whatever sport we need to do to stick together, which has been really positive.
No, now you have to hold on to it. The last person has to hold on to it. So totally had questions. I'm changing the questions. So in the film, my personal just gave you homework for no reason. My personal favorite part was when one of the women was talking about show up for your sport, like whatever sport that is. Show up for your sport and love it as much as you can, so that the sport can love the people who do it back. Can any of you think of a time, like, that really resonated with me. I'm a professional mountain biker, which is crazy to say, but I pay my bills through mountain bike racing, and it's been a crazy journey to get there, by no means, but I'm a garbage skier, got super inspired listening to that, and just wondering how loving your sport keeps you showing up as yourself, like whatever way, however you show up, whether you're new, whether you've been doing it for a long time, whether, however that looks for you. Like, that really resonated with me. Does that stick out with any of y'all?
Yeah, definitely. I think for myself, I'm a teacher by day, so I really enjoy teaching people new skills and finding ways to be inclusive in that. So getting out and teaching through adaptive sports, coaching sailing, showing up and volunteering at different bike events has been really, really a great way to do that and show my passion and pass that passion on, especially with like the young kids. Showing up, having that smile, being active and engaging has been really something that I strive to do, because it's only fun if you can do it with people that are cool. So that's my opinion.
I was thinking a lot about that part of this movie as well, and I guided for a long time in a lot of different areas, rock climbing and in the Boundary Waters as well, and I think about like the aspect of putting there at the end. There were a lot of mothers talking about like kids and having kids and that kind of like aspect of like, oh, sometimes you like set aside things that you're doing in your life or you might want to be doing in your life to like be all the way in the sport or the thing that you're doing. And there's such an interesting balance there. I just loved that part when they were talking about like, okay, how do you find this balance? And also like, where are the role models who are like balancing those things and getting to like have kids or have other parts of their lives and then still continue like doing this thing that they're really passionate about was pretty cool.
Thanks for your question, Alexandra. I would say that I had a really, I don't know, some of you have heard this story, it's a little tired at this point, but I blew my face open this summer, mountain bike racing, and part of the reason that I went off the feature that I went off of, the terrarium calculated risk, it's a large cliff over a ravine, was because I had heard some guy on the hill saying, oh, I never see girls do that. And I knew it was the edge of my skill level, but it was the Bike Fest, and I felt like it was so important for people to see more women and girls doing that. Unfortunately, I crashed on my pre-seeding run, but what was really beautiful, I pour my heart into connecting people. I plan mountain bike trips, I invite people on rides, and the outpouring of support after that was my sport loving me back. And that felt so good. So thank you for everyone for that. So I think that love really, we give it as we can when we can, and we get to receive it when it's that time too.
Amazing.
Are we all answering this?
I mean, if you have something to say, if you don't, like, go ahead. I have another question that's not on the sheet. So.
For me, the last 5 to 10 years have been really transformative for me in terms of how I view myself in the activities that I do outdoors. In particular, last summer, and Megan, you sort of triggered my memory. I had the opportunity to work with, it's not Courage Duluth, it's not Courage Kenny, it's Northland Adaptive Recreation, and Eric Larson, who's been a long time acquaintance of mine, asked me to work on a contract he had with the Wounded Warrior program. And I got to take this dragon boat full of Wounded Warriors out and show them something that I love to do. And then I got to kayak with them the next day, and then spent some time with them on horses. But anyway, I have been in a phase in the last few years where I decided I was not liking the sport anymore and not wanting to do the things that I had done because there had been so many challenges, so many politics, so much sexism. And I had the opportunity to do this, and I had a person who was part of that group come up to me who was a drill sergeant, and he said, "Megan, you are an excellent teacher and you are an excellent leader, and you have completely," I started off their week, it was the first activity that they did, and he also presented me with a token that they give out very selectively as part of their program. And he also said that I could go into any bar near a military base and get free drinks. Which, so that sort of was a game changer for me in understanding why it's important to remember to love what you do.
I thought of a ton of things when she said that. But I think the thing that I will share that is, for me, more part of my whole lifetime is that showing up for me was being the only woman guide at a river company. It was being the only woman at Yakima Car Racks as a corporate company. And so the other thing that was said in there, and this would maybe be the thing, if you ask this question about advice, is I struggled with asking for what I deserved, and I think that I've continued to do that throughout my life because of when we started very young, things were very different than they are now. And at the same time, a lot of things haven't changed.
Yeah.
So we've had lots of conversations in this community about what hasn't changed and how we move things forward and how we're more inclusive. But showing up isn't always showing up because you want to be there, but it's because, like some of the girls said, you need to be there. As a female who maybe knows how to mountain bike, how to row, how to do all these sports. Dragon boat wagon, sorry. I failed. Paddling, okay. Paddling. And whether you're also of a different nationality, I think is important. So for me, that was like a huge, yeah, that's right. I've done that a lot in my life, and I need to continue doing that. But at the same time, recognize those who are still doing that. And when we were talking about this panelist, one of the conversations is we needed kind of a grandma person from the industry. And the reason I said that is because when I worked at Mount Bachelor, there was, my boss said, "Hey, I want you to go out and do this story on these two guys who have this competition every year who can ski more days than each other." So I went out and did this story on these two guys who were retired, who were white, who were rich, who lived in Bend, Oregon, who had it all, and they skied every single day. And it was kind of a boring story, to be honest.
Yeah.
I wasn't super motivated, but they were doing what they love, and you got to admire them about that. But through that story, one of my colleagues said, well, have you ever met this woman named Donna? And she was a 90-year-old woman who had been coming to the mountain her whole life. She lived in Bend, and she skied every single day, Nordic skiing. So I went out and did a story on her, and I was like, oh, this is going to be great. And it really was, it was a life-changing story for me, because she was 90, she could barely walk, and I had to try to make her skiing look interesting, because when we actually went out, I was like, well, she's been skiing all this time, she's going to be this rock star, right? It's going to be a fun, you got to make it entertaining so people will watch it. And she literally did 1K every single day, and it took us about 45 minutes to do 1K. And
She's 90.
yeah. And she was like your first wave Berkey people. She took it that serious. She was wearing all the right gear. She was ambitious, and she was and she knew everything about her skis and her poles. She really was a badass rock star who was 90.
But we didn't talk about her.
And nobody knew her on the mountain. But she also then, after we did the story, because she was so fantastic in the rest of her life too, she became more inspiring than any of the other stories I did in the entire year that we, did these stories once a week. So, so the point there is that when, she said that and you're asking this question, is that she showed up. But it took until 90 for her to even get recognition, and she became kind of a local hero after the video, and she was just so humbled by it. But so that's I think that showing up in a lot of different ways is super critical.
Yeah, and a lot of what you said really resonated with me. Even now, I'm in my mid-30s. I've been racing bikes for 10 years and finally started getting paid 2 years ago. But still, asking for what I think I'm worth is an impossible question, a possible thing to do, because I just don't know any, before this, I didn't know any professional mountain bikers. So that got me thinking about who and why. Why did I decide to go down the path that I'm going down, and who inspired me? And I'm pretty stoked that it was a woman in my head, but her name is Alice Drobna, and she finished the Triple Crown Challenge, which is this crazy 4,000-mile summer of racing your bike as hard as you can. And she did it in 2015, and she was the first woman to do it. She did it on a single speed, and up until last year, she had been the only woman to have ever done it. And I finished it this year. Thanks. But it was more so oh my gosh, there was a person who did this really hard thing, who happened to also be a woman, who happened to do it on a single speed, which I never used to ride single speeds. I ride single speeds now, but it was because I knew it was possible. So what I'm wondering is who's your person? Who, whether it was a man, I think that's also important if that's who we saw, but did they look like you? Did you see people like you? I never see Native people ever racing their bikes in the races that I do, and it feels hard to feel alone and unseen, but I still show up, and this year was crazy. Like I said, I'm only in my 30s, but it's all these young 20-year-olds who've been watching me race, and they're like, oh, the reason I'm here is because of you, which is whoa, it kind of, it matters that I'm doing what I love. But yeah, just curious if anybody comes to any of y'all's brains about your person.
My person is easy. My person is my mom. My mom was a single mom, had a really rough life, and she stumbled upon being a river guide, and she was the only woman in this community, Coloma, which is one of the most commercially ran rivers, the American River, And she used to come home and cried a lot because every time she made a mistake, it was because she was incompetent and didn't have the skills. But every time her, colleague who was a guy made a mistake, it was because he drank too much the night before or he just had a bad day. So it was really rough as a kid watching my mom in that industry. And my mom was probably a better guide than most of the men. And she probably did twice as much work than most of the men and got paid half the amount. But I watched her through that, and by the time I was 14, I was like, I'm never going to be a river guide. But I had a choice to work on a hamburger stand or work on the river. And so I lied and said I was 16 and I worked on the river. And because I saw my mom, but also because I was sort of forced into this river environment, I had already kind of had the confidence, and it changed my life. So it really was because of my mom. Had my mom not done that, I wouldn't even be right here where I am today. Thanks, Bob.
I'm going to be really honest. I didn't have a person. When I was 16, I was going to go work at a Girl Scout camp, and my guy friends said, "You're going to pay to be a counselor in training? You should go work at a Boy Scout camp, because they're not going to charge you, and you can rock climb, and you can canoe, and not do noodle art." And I was like, sign me up. And I mean, maybe my person was my dad, who's it's kind of ironic to say that. He's a really conservative old white male who never said you can do what the guys can do. He said you can do whatever you want to do. And that was a blessing and a curse, because I thrust myself at the age of 16 into a very male-dominated environment and didn't really realize that there was going to be some people that looked at me and questioned what my intention was for being there. And that is true for most of my adult life, and it really isn't until I would say 2015, 2016, where I understood what advocacy was and what advocating for women was about, because of a woman named Shannon Miller. And I'll leave it at that. Some of you might know. But I spent a lot of time in a federal courtroom watching her prove why women deserve to have more and to show up and to ask for what they're worth. And present day, the women that are inspiring to me, I mean, I have to have a moment here. I am the biggest fan girl. When Andrea Krause told me that you were moderating, I was like, so I came to one of your mountain bike talks, and I was like, this woman is amazing. And present day, Bobby, like reconnecting with Bobby. Bobby is the kind of person that is always rooting on other women, and like, you got to come to this in my current business that I own. You got to come to this. You got to come to this. She's always showing up for me. And so I would also like to do a little shout out to my friend Binner right there. Everybody knows Binner. Binner showed up when I was in college, and Binner was this person that had done these things that I wanted to do. And so they were there, but they were never elevated, and they were never talked about or super present, and they were always there. Nobody ever pointed them out, and I had to see them later in life, so.
Thank you. Yeah, my background I mentioned with guiding canoe trips in the Boundary Waters with Girl Scouts. So that was right out of college, and
Sorry about the Girl Scout comment.
no, I dropped out of Girl Scouts in 2nd grade, and I went to the Boy Scout camp because we were being taught how to set tables, and I didn't want to do that. But the Girl Scouts in the Boundary Waters are totally awesome. But so there we are, Boundary Waters. Raise your hand if you've been. Probably a lot of people. Okay, raise your hand if you've seen an all-female crew out there. Okay, raise your hand if you've seen an all-teen girl crew out there. Yep, the hands start to thin a little bit, but they're there. And so for me, I didn't really realize that. I went to the Boundary Waters as a kid. It's a wonderful place. But going there in college and seeing how rare we were, but more importantly, oftentimes people were not offering help, but just helping. And much to my chagrin, if you can imagine. And so that became really important to me, to show the girls, we can do this. We can do this. And for them to experience that over and over and over again. And those portages are like hollowed ground because I saw girls do things I wasn't even sure they could do. And now, as I'm older, they come back to me and they tell me, that is what taught me that I could do things, right? And that they took it and they made it their own. And that's beautiful. Well, a few years later, I was working with incarcerated teenage boys for the Department of Corrections, working on 21-day wilderness courses. And there were almost no females guiding. And so I was out on a trip with all dudes, and it was intimidating and challenging. And I remember one night saying to my co-guide, how am I supposed to teach them that women are powerful? How am I supposed to teach that? I was under constant scrutiny, right? I had to be the fastest, I had to be the strongest, I couldn't make mistakes. And these were teenagers. I was supposed to be their guide. And I remember, I'm really grateful for my co-guide. He just took a deep breath and he just said, I don't know. And that's what I needed, because then I started to realize how important it was for them to see. And at the end of one of these courses, the boy who gave me the most trouble and who had made a lot of sexist comments, had a history of domestic violence, he said to me, Lindsay, thank you. I just didn't know that women could do that. And so that to me really opened my eyes that it's important for everybody to see what everybody is capable of. And I'm really proud that I can teach other people about mountain biking. I spend a ton of time learning from whoever I can, men, women, trans people, and I'm really, really grateful for that. So my people are the girls and the boys that I've worked with. I see their faces on the side of a trail when I want to quit. I think about them when I'm not sure if I can do something, when I'm signing up for something, when there's no women, and I just think it's really important that they see me out here. Even if I'm not even doing it very well, you have to start somewhere.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Lindsay. That was so good. I grew up going to a all-women, I mean, it wasn't all women, but I was on courses that were all-women expeditionary camp in northern Minnesota. And we did, over the course of many years, many long expeditions with all women. And I'll be honest, we never talked about being all women. Guide was female, all of us were female, and we never talked about it. It just wasn't relevant in the situation that we were in. It didn't matter that, because we were all just like doing the things that we needed to do to like be okay and survive and stay warm and have an amazing time and like be really goofy together, and it just wasn't relevant at all. So it was like my background in this. And then I turned 18, I went to college far away from Minnesota, and I started interacting with more people who hadn't grown up in spaces where it didn't matter as much that you were female or you were male or you were gender nonconforming. And they brought a lot of that into the outdoor spaces that I was in, into learning how to rock climb, into becoming like very good and very competent at that sport, and then not seeing any women guiding in the industry that I was going into. I don't think I realized like the impact of like not talking about that until I was in those spaces, and I wasn't sure exactly like how to start that conversation, because I'd never really talked about what it meant to be female in the outdoors, because it didn't matter when I was younger. I then graduated, I went back and started working for an expeditionary camp as well, and I was guiding all women's trips, and I spent a lot of time, similar to what you're talking about, Lindsay, talking about that. Talking about experiences that these girls who I was working with had in their life outside of being in this like kind of unique environment, and also just like asking questions about like how they were going to be able to take these experiences and like use them in the rest of their lives. And I got a lot of support in those spaces and in that place from male coworkers and from other folks, which was just really pretty incredible, because it just felt like things were shifting a little bit as far as like, everyone was interested in having those conversations and in like bringing their all male groups into those conversations as well, which is really quite incredible. So I think about that a lot. I think my person was, looking back on it now, was probably one of my counselors on one of those trips, just someone who, it didn't matter that she was female, but she was like doing a really badass thing by being out in that space and by like being very strong and empowering to all these young women she was working with. And I think it also has just been similar to what a couple people have said, like everyone that I've learned from to make me feel more competent in these areas that I want to be in.
So for me, it'd probably be, the first person would be my mom. We're a big sailing family. We've sailed all over the country and, hundreds of miles of water. And my mom learned to sail because she was driving home and she had a hitch on her car and she saw a boat and it was free, so she bought it. And then she taught herself to sail, and then she taught herself to race sailboats. And then she met my dad through sailing. So for me, we were just forced to be there. That's where our crib was. There's a little Johnny jumper on the back. There was no, exception not to be there. And then moving forward into my high school years, my mom started an all-women's sailing night. So we'd have, 10 to 20 keel boats, so the big boats crewed by 5 to 15 people out there, all women racing. And I sailed on the kids' boat. My mom sailed on the adult boat, and we would go at it first and second place every week. So it's just kind of one of those places where I was just forced to be in it, and there was no option. And I didn't really realize, kind of like what you were saying, the difference until I was in college, and then past college when people are questioning my sailing abilities because I'm a female, or oh, are you learning to sail? And I'm like, oh no, this is my boat, or I'm the skipper actually. So it's kind of grew up in a little bit of a naive world to that. So.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing. And I'm going to wrap this up here with one last quick question. I'll share my answer after, so it gives you time to think about it, because it's also not on the sheet. But
Studied.
I know. Well, I like it to be authentic. So my question is, in 30 seconds to a minute or less, what's your advice to the young ones, to the ones who are curious, to whomever? And I think about this all the time. My advice is to follow your heart or your gut or whatever part of you that moves you to be whoever you are, to be the best part of yourself. Because every time I ever did something I thought I should do, I look back on that now and be like, wow, I wish I followed my heart. I quit my jobs and decided to race bikes full time, not really knowing if it would ever turn into anything, if I'd ever make money, if I'd ever be able to buy groceries with it. And it's kind of working. Not fully, but it's kind of working. So, yeah, some advice. Quick.
My advice would be, I'm very new to mountain biking, and what I did is I started volunteering, so I joined the Cox Board after mountain biking for 1 year. Really weird choice. But it really allowed me to meet people like Lindsay, like Bobby, who then, opened the door and made me feel comfortable, and then I could show up to these events or put on these events and kind of go through a volunteer lens, so I wasn't just showing up for my biking, I was showing up because I, helped plan it, and that kind of gave me the power and the confidence to be there.
Sick.
I think my advice would be that it doesn't have to be the first thing you try. I feel like a lot of the folks we see in movies are like, oh, I learned how to downhill ski when I was 5 years old, and look at me now, I'm fantastic at it. And that is incredible. I love that for them. And that isn't the case for most people who try an outdoor sport. They're like, oh, I'm actually I don't like this. I don't like being cold, or I'm not sure about running, or whatever the thing is. And that's okay. You can try some different things and figure out what the thing is that you feel passionate about. And it doesn't have to happen when you're 5 for you to then be great at it when you're an adult also.
I love that because I actually don't really like to paddle. It took me almost 7 years, and I tried mountain biking a couple years ago, and I love it. My advice would be, and I'm going to ask for some crowd participation here. First, I'm going to put Brittany Roth on the spot. She taught me how to ride a lot of really hard lines. She coached me when there were even less gals, even just a couple years ago. So thank you, Brittany. But my next question is, raise your hand if any of the people up here have invited you out on a ride, onto a team, to an event. So raise your hands. All right. Yes, that's how we do it, ladies and folks. We invite each other out. Now raise your hand if you were new, but now you're inviting other people, you're challenging them to race, you're borrowing them equipment. Let's see those hands. Who has passed that on? That's how we do it. That's my
Okay, three things. First thing is surround yourself with people that genuinely want you to succeed. male, female, trans, otherwise, the whole spectrum. Surround yourself with those people, listen to them, go towards the positive, right? The second thing is show up, speak your truth, don't be attached to the outcome. Last thing is, sorry, I'm gonna swear. I know there's littles. Okay.
I'm waiting for this moment.
Take no shit, but do no harm.
Yeah.
Great job, ladies. I've got two too. So one recently we had a women's ride following the summit, and this is Abby actually up there who said this, is that some days we don't really want to get out in the cold. We don't want to, get all the equipment. It's all too much work, and sometimes you just need a little nudge, and that just is huge. Be that nudge, and again, surround yourself by people who can nudge you. But more importantly, and this is one that I've learned and I've seen many women specifically, and I'm going to give the analogy based on running rivers because that's my world more than anything else. But when it comes to making a decision, whether it's a ride down a cliff or it's a jump off of a ski hill, whatever it is, that we are always having this pressure to compare to the men or to the professional athletes, but you need to really take responsibility. And so when I run a river and I've got a crew of people and I'm at a rapid and I'm not feeling like we're gonna really nail this, I'm putting myself at risk, I'm putting my crew at risk, I'm putting the safety of everybody around me at risk. And as a woman, if I do that and I fail, my consequences are much higher than anybody else. And I've had to learn that lesson more than once, and I've seen lots of other women in all walks of industries, at all levels, try to fake it until they make it. And I'm not a fan of faking it until you make it. I'm a fan of standing up and saying, hey, I'm not quite ready. I might be able to do that, but I'm gonna keep practicing until I am damn sure that I can do that, without getting injured, without putting other people at risk, without putting a group of people who have to come out and rescue you in the lake because you've made a silly decision because you were trying to prove something. So that's my strongest advice that I really think is critical for not just women, but everybody, but women pay a higher price.
Great advice. Be yourself, know yourself, trust yourself, share yourself, share your invitations. But yeah, give him a round of applause. Thank you all, many miigwitches, for showing up tonight, and thank you all for sharing your story with all of us.
You too.
Sick!